Hello, delighted to be joined by Jim Blakemore today, who is the Managing Partner and Global Head of Debt Investment at BGO. Jim, great to have you with us, especially as you're taking time out from your holiday.
Well, thank you, Serena. No, happy to do it.
And we've known each other for a number of years, but even during my desk research in advance of this, I've never known where you were prior to your Lehman days. Where did you start your career?
I started at a law firm, which was actually based in Tower 2 of the World Trade Center. And so it was a firm, Thatcher, Croft and Wood, which was incredible. Really, I had no idea how lucky I was to do so many transactions and represent so many different clients and negotiate so many different people early in my career. And some of the deals were larger, some of the deals were smaller, but it was just this high volume of transactions, which I felt really I learned a lot doing, bringing people together, bringing people over the line, getting deals done, representing my client, but also just making sure that the deal got done, which was great.
Was that in real estate that you specialized?
It was in real estate and securitization. And securitization was useful because it pulled together, especially at it wasn't the early days of securitization for the U.S., but it was relatively early. And it was the very early days for CMBS. So you were really forced to draw upon multiple disciplines and pull it together. Sometimes law is being a little bit like a plumber and following the same diagram over and over again. But in those early days of CMBS, there really wasn't a diagram. And the parties involved in the transactions were still figuring out as well. So that was incredibly useful and quite intellectually very challenging. So I really enjoyed that.
And legal training would have been a very useful segue into real estate as a principal when you joined Lehman. And you're an unusual person in terms of today's work environment in that you've really had, since being a lawyer, only two firms that I know of in the last 30 years, with Lehman Brothers and then BGO.
Yeah, it's, I don't know what I planned, to be frank. I had no idea. But, I think had Lehman not gone bankrupt, I think there'd probably be a high likelihood I would have finished there. And BGO as well. I think, both firms, while very different, were cultures that I think empowered people to take advantage of opportunities. I think both had very different cultures, but both really good cultures. And I was fortunate and am fortunate to have worked with some incredible people there who, I really haven't had a bad boss. And really by contrast, at Lehman, I worked with Mark Walsh, who's very well known in property, and I'm still great friends with Mark, which has been phenomenal. And another person, Andy Morton, who really on the rates derivative side, who now runs all of markets at Citibank. And then obviously at BGO working for John and Sonny, all four of those people, very, very different, but all inspirational, highly ambitious, thought leaders, and culture leaders all in their own way. And, I think I've really benefited from working under such really strong leadership, and I've definitely learned a lot from that.
And you very quotably said a few years back when you were talking to Real Estate Capital, I think it was at the time, that you need to be a little paranoid in a market like this. That was on the back of the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah.
What's making you feel paranoid today?
I think really rates and yields. I think that's the kind of the crux of it. There's always something as a lender, if you want to be doing this for a while, you need to be afraid, a little paranoid. I would think that's probably the thing that I'm focused on is we've had a world that's gotten used to very cheap money. I think a lot of us were hopeful that rates would come down quicker than they have, and they haven't really. So I think while long-term, I think most of us believe that rates are going to end up lower than where they are today. The question is, where do they end up? And as a lender, it's tricky to kind of choose that. and what are the right stresses to use to analyze properties. So I think that, to me, that's the biggest risk. The inflation risk is obviously correlated with that, but I think, at least in my mind, the risks that I was referring to then, and was really worried on COVID, were more on shortage of labor, shortage of material, and prices that were going up dramatically, where we'd really have to stress building costs, material costs, which really limited proceeds on transactions.
How do you find ways to keep your team stretched and motivated? This is a super tight hiring market, as you know. The talent is really light because most people are employed within the sector. There's rises in wages. How are you approaching these dynamics?
I think we've tried to keep the team relatively small. I think that's one thing. We're working with a lot of people that I've worked with for a long time. So, whatever personality I have, most of them must like it because they're still here. I think we want to be able to fulfill people's ambitions without them leaving. So I think, and that the impetus there is really on me to raise capital to fulfill those ambitions. So we have capital so if they're covering clients, that they can deliver for their clients. And then it's also critical to me, and this is obviously tied with capital raising, is to make sure our performance is strong, because you can't raise money without performance. And I think our performance really goes back to culture. And so we try to get people that share our mindset of, they may not agree with us, but how do we look at property? And we've really been focused on lending on assets that we think are going to be long-term relevant. And that sounds like a really simple thing to say. And while we have lent on office, we haven't lent on old office. And so I think this focus on next buyer analysis, trying to make sure we're lending on as best as we can determine future-proof real estate is critical. And so I think that goes to the track record. But I think back to culture I think it goes a lot to what I talked about at Lehman. And I think what we're trying to do broadly and have done at BGO is take a group of smart, motivated people and try to get everyone pointed more or less in the same direction, and go somewhere great together. And if I look at our team, our first fund we did was 224 million sterling. Today, we're making loans much larger than that. So I think we've been able to provide an environment where we can fulfill people's ambitions. And today, we've now broadened out our lending business even more so to the U.S., which again is creating opportunities for people that, whether you have Americans who want to work in Europe, or you have Europeans who want to work in a global business or work in the States, we can provide that. Likewise, I hate this word technology when it comes to real estate debt, but some of the techniques and the financing that people use in the U.S. is relevant for Europe and vice versa. So we now have more global experts, where we have younger people who, despite being in their 30s, now have kind of de facto global roles of having responsibility for communicating with Abby Barak, who runs our U.S. business, communicating with the team in Europe, getting the information. And I don't think a lot of other firms, kind of offer that up. So that's something we've been excited to do.
And in terms of where you see the bright spots on the horizon, where do you see some of the opportunities over the next 12 to 24 months?
I think, well, first, taking a global perspective, I think we're benefiting from banks being less and less involved. And I think that's going to continue for quite a while. So in the U.S., we've benefited immensely from reduced banking from the regional banks. And in Europe, we're definitely feeling the same. We're feeling probably from bigger banks in Europe, less lending, more consolidation. I think that's going to just continue, and that's going to help us. As far as asset classes, which are interesting, I think it's nice to see retail slowly coming back as an investable asset class. In a world where
change of purpose, or is that retail just repriced to a level that now makes sense for investors?
At first we were doing repurposing. So we financed quite a bit of that. And as you probably know, not every retail center works well for repurposing. And it can be a lot of heavy lifting. There can be community opposition, planning issues. But I think where it works, there's a handful of assets it works really well at. But we're seeing more just in general retail, partly just at the right price, a lot of things work a lot better. So the ability for certain centers who've gone through COVID, who've gone through online, the rents have been knocked down immensely, and they traded very wide yields, even in today's higher interest rate environment, are much more interesting. I think what will be fascinating to play out will be the office market in Europe. The U.S. office market has got a lot of challenges, which are incredibly well documented. I think the real question is, Europe is different from a work from home. Europe's different from the amount of stock. Where does that all play out? How much do global headwinds interact with local realities? And so I think that's going to be fascinating to play out. But I think from a productivity point of view, and I can say this about, I guess Allison Rose, who left NatWest now, at one point I think was saying, everyone can work from home almost. And I think any institution that thinks that, they will not have any culture. And if you really want to compete against the best, you do need people together interacting. I travel quite a bit, fundraising, looking at transactions. I have a global role, so I'm in the U.S. and in Europe. Anytime we're face to face, we're just vastly more productive, more creative. And so I think the pure remote work from home model doesn't work. And I think it might work for a few people who don't want to interact with people, but for building talent, for building a culture, it is you can survive during a COVID period, but can you thrive long-term using that model? I don't think so. And I'm not that unique. I don't think that's...
You just look at the mental health issues as well that have already been registered for people working from home. We know that this isn't a healthy dynamic. You look at the osmosis effect of being able to hear what your colleagues are saying across the desk rather than picking up the phone or pinging an email. So 100% behind you. Do you see it as a 3-day, 4-day, 5-day return to work?
It's funny. We were never in 5 days a week, if we're honest, I think. There's all these surveys of tracking gate cards and this. I remember even at Lehman, my first year there in 95, I was like, where are these people? Oh, they're on the road. They're traveling. Oh, they're this. They're going to Cape Cod. They're doing all these things. So, 100% occupancy, it certainly in the fields I've worked in was a fallacy. It never was that. So, we've really moved, at least what I've seen most people move to is kind of a 4-day a week, this kind of Friday work from home, which to be frank is probably a little bit of a misnomer because Friday is not quite as productive as it used to be. I think going back to culture, I think being an organization, I think if you look at, from the top, John and Sonny, and I think I've done the same, is you want to respect people's time and, acknowledging that people have important things in their lives that they want to do. And, if someone wants to leave for the afternoon to go do something, to go see the doctor, to go talk to the teachers of their kids, to do something with their spouse or their partner, That's important stuff, and it doesn't cost us anything really. I think the people that we've hired, they're not taking advantage of that. And so allowing that flexibility, whether it's Monday through Friday, is critical, or allowing people to say, you know what, I want to work here for a little while because my dream has been to move to New York, or I'm 50 years old. I thought I was going to be a ski bum. Now I'm working in finance. I'd like to spend a month living in Verbier. Like, okay, we'll keep an eye on you. You might be able to do that. We could let people do that. So I think, going back to what I was saying is we want to see if we can try to have people fulfill their dreams, both professionally and personally within the team. And if we can provide that, we're going to have better retention, better culture.
As you look back over the career history, what are you singly most proud of?
I think I'm proud that I built a business doing European lending at Lehman. Put together a really big team. I'm proud that, looking back, at first I was, thought the track record would be disastrous, kind of in September 2008, like, oh boy, this could be really tough. But I look back at the team and what we did. I think we did a lot of great things, and the loans held up, which is nice. And then I'm really happy to have built another team at GreenOak, and then expanded that team at BGO, where today we are one of the more active global players. If you want lending globally, of course there's a number of managers that do that, but not that many. And I think we have a global franchise that I think epitomizes the culture that we have at BGO, where we're trying to take people, give them opportunity. And so I think that's what I'm most proud of. And it is great to have worked with so many of the same clients over this period, so many of the same borrowers, so many of the LPs who've moved around, who've stuck with us. Our first investor in our U.S. fund is, it's a global consultant, but the individual was the same individual who backed us in 2013, backed us in 2023 in the U.S. So I think building those relationships, one, it's a lot more fun for me. And as you go through life, to have clients that you can trust enough to let down your guard, talk about what makes you nervous, not only at work, but like what's going on in your life. What's happening with your family, where are the health issues, what, challenges with children, to be able to do that not only with your friends, but with your colleagues, but also with, borrowers and investors in our funds over all these years. I really like that. That energizes me. And the more I do that, the better, to be frank.
Well, Jim, I really appreciate your time in this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Serena. Really appreciate it. I've enjoyed our time.
Excellent.